So, William, Reanimated 2, it's been out for a while. We have already reached Alpha 8. I think it's about to change the game, but what is your experience so far with?
Did you upgrade to Alpha yet already? Alpha 8 already or?
So, I have one project on Alpha 8, on the other. I still have some trouble upgrading. It's not always that easy to go to the next alpha, but I have it on the one, and if you get it running, I think it's the best one yet.
Yes, I also had some issue with the migrations. So now if you want to call functions which exist on the JavaScript thread from the UI thread, you have to do it explicitly, which I think is good. But if you add Alpha 7 or Alpha 6 code, it crashes without telling you anything, which can be a bit troubling because you upgrade and your app crashes. I did have a regression which prevented me from upgrading to Alpha 8 in one of my projects. It's a scroll to method, which doesn't seem to, or at least the way I'm using it doesn't work anymore. But yeah, I filed a bug for it, and I'm really looking forward to Alpha 8. I know that you had one big bug report about the shared values not being memoized. Is that being fixed in
Yeah,
Alpha 8 or?
exactly. That's one of the changes in Alpha 8 that you need to watch out for. So previously, the parameter that you pass into use shared value, if that, for example, comes from a prop and that prop changes, then on the next re-render, the shared value would change as well. And
Which was completely counterintuitive because you would expect
yes,
use shared value to be symmetric with use ref, essentially.
yeah, exactly. I mean, for example, use state, I am used to that. What I pass in is the initial value, and that then the state doesn't change if I change the initial value later. But in Reanimated, it did that, and I had to get used to this, or like even realize at first that this is the case. So I filed an issue, and now I told them, "Can you consider to change it?" And they actually did it. So now you can actually decide which behavior you have. So now there's a second parameter for use shared value, um, which I think it's called reconstruct, and you can pass in true or false depending on what you want.
So that's for Alpha 8. Overall, I'm pretty happy with Reanimated 2. It's a game changer now, but it's still rough around the edges on some use cases. When it was first publicly announced, so I had my gestures and animation use cases, and first, all the use cases I was doing with V1 couldn't be implemented with V2. There were some things not working, and color interpolation is one of them, but there were some other things also dealing with side effects and so on. And after, I guess, Alpha 6, all my V1 use cases were supported. So still some bugs, still some, I mean, like just the thing we discussed, some things which are a bit rough around the edges, but then I could really cover the 100% of my use cases with Reanimated 2, so that was like one step forward. And also you can still use V1 in V2. So, people always ask me, okay, it's alpha, should I use it or not? And now it feels pretty safe because it's shipped with Expo. If you have an issue like we have sometimes, we can still use V1 animation nodes. So it feels now low risk to approach Reanimated 2.
I think if you now install the newest alpha, you are pretty safe to go. I think the most major bugs and side effects have been patched, and now it's pretty safe to try. What I think is like two things about the new Reanimated, which like completely changes everything, is the first thing is that now you are able in React Native to program two threads in one file, and this is like something that has never been done before, and I wonder, wow, how did they even manage to do that? So it's like something completely different, right?
That's something that might be explored in the future. Is that now that we have this extra thread we can use to run JavaScript code, maybe we're going to use it to do non-animation related tasks and to give some breathing to the JavaScript thread, which in React sometimes can be, in compared to other like maybe native mobile apps, because we have this single thread where a lot of things can happen at the same time. Of course, React is very good at dealing with that, but sometimes it can be a lot. And now we have this suddenly an API to access a new thread essentially. And I mean, we use it for gestures and animations. Potentially, there might be use cases outside, I guess, this area of problems.
Definitely. So I think like the JavaScript thread is like so little bandwidth, especially if you want to target lower Android devices, that you have to be super careful what you want to run on it. So with this new Worklet thingy and turbo module that's coming from it, it definitely solves a problem that so many of us have.
On the gestures and animation side, the fact that now we can run complex JavaScript functions. You remember in V1, I wanted to run these complex algebraic functions, which really couldn't work at scale in V1, and also because you create so many animation nodes. Now we can build really super complex gestures and animations because we can run JavaScript code directly instead of building these animation nodes, and you couldn't do things like looping, and you didn't have complex animation values. So the fact that now we can have also complex animation values, arrays, objects, can actually simplify some gestures and animations use cases by an order of magnitude. And I've worked on an example where we literally made the implementation 10 times smaller. So going from V1 nodes to worklets, because we could use complex animation values, so arrays, objects. So that simplified the logic by one-fold. And then, because we don't use all these animation nodes for this complex logic, it's just JavaScript code, the performance has also increased by tenfold.
That is the other really big advantage of using Reanimated 2. It's so much more expressive and straightforward to implement what you want to do. With these functions add, sub before, not only did it not give you so many capabilities, but it was also hard to understand for yourself. So with this, we have solved two big problems. I feel like it's like if you previously wrote the assembly code for yourself and now you have like a real programming language.
One thing with Reanimated 2, because of the Babel plugin, and also because of some concepts of Reanimated 2, and I'm thinking about higher order animations, there are a lot of magic happening, which is not explicit to the user, which I think to a newcomer can be actually pretty confusing, because it feels now like everything is integrated. You just write JavaScript code, but actually there is a lot happening behind the scene. And there is a Babel plugin that processes some of the functions. So you need to not forget the worklet directives. There is also an order of declaration, which is different from what you see in the source code because it's done by the Babel plugin, which can lead to undefined variables on the UI thread, even though on the code, the ESLint static analysis, it looks fine. Have you experienced some troubles with some of the magic that is happening with Reanimated 2?
Yeah, there's been some really crazy stuff. I think we are used to some rules in JavaScript of what you can do and what you can't do, and those have always been valid. But now that there's a Babel plugin involved and you're programming two threads, there are like the rules have changed. Now there are different things that you can and cannot do, and we have to adjust our mindset to unlearn these rules and learn the new ones. Recently I tried to import like a complex variable inside the worklet, but that was defined somewhere outside. It was kind of janky, and I tried to make it work, but did not like cleanly follow all the best practices. And what ended up was that this variable was uh, undefined, but I did not spot the bug immediately. I just saw not a number. So what do? I naturally console.log the variable. But when I console.log the variable, the variable was then actually, it started defining it. So it parsed it differently, and the variable was now available, and my animation worked as intended. I was like, oh, I was stupid. I removed the console.log, problem fixed, and then it started breaking again. That was crazy.
That's another behavior. So in Reanimated 2, the first pass is executed on the initialization is executed on the JavaScript thread. And actually, for some advanced use cases, there can be some slight difference of executions when it's done on the JavaScript thread and on the UI thread. And I'm thinking about, for instance, color interpolation, where, at initiation, when we're running it on the JavaScript thread, the color interpolation worklet would behave completely differently than on the second pass, which is done on the UI thread. So because of these things, we eat sometimes some edge cases. I hope that further down the road, for sure, there will be more static analysis, like ESLint plugins, I guess. Right? If you have the Reanimated Babel plugin, hopefully at some point we'll have an ESLint Reanimated plugin that looks at worklets, look at functions which are automatically, how do you call it, workletized, where you don't need to put the worklet directives. There is potentially a bunch of we could have like static analysis that understand all the magic that is done by the Babel plugin and let us know about common mistake we can do.
I really want to see this happen. I'm also already glad that we now have some better runtime error detection. So when I upgrade to the latest alpha, like you did, I also got some errors. You need to wrap this inside run on JS, and although it breaks and you have to fix it, it's really good that now there's some indication that you are doing some wonky stuff. And every error that is not being silenced, being thrown, is a good thing. And I think the ESLint plugin, that's a great idea.
And
are we tempted?
Yes. And I think now also you can build ESLint plugins which are way more advanced than what it used to be. But, well, maybe a weekend hackathon, I don't know.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
Like the React plugin which tells you that you put the wrong dependencies in, but for Reanimated.
Yeah.
Fixes all for.
The last area which I think can be difficult for beginners in Reanimated 2 are higher order animations. This feature, I think, is the most underrated one because I don't see anyone talking about it. And I find this concept now so powerful. But again, it comes at a cost because it does a lot of things like hidden to the user. But sometimes, actually, when you're trying to understand, debug your animations and so on, the fact that there's so many things happening as a black box and you don't know what's going on can be difficult, right? So if, for instance, you assign with timing to an animation value, you have to understand like the semantic of it, that the previous value to the variable you're assigning the animation object to is that's the start value of your animation. So lots of magic happening, right? And that with timing doesn't return a value but an object. But then if you do x.value equals with timing and you console log x.value, you will get 0, 1, 2, and so on. But that's actually an object. And then you switch to scalar values, potentially depending on the use cases. There are a lot of things happening. The great thing is that this API to build custom animations is so powerful. And I've made some videos on YouTube to show cases where we have like a timing function. You loop, you say with loop. You want it to be pausable, resumable. You do with pause. So everything is composable. That's why I call it higher order animations. They are like first class citizen into the library. They can be composed, but they are like they are kind of hidden to the user, which I think can be confusing sometimes. But super powerful concept where, for instance, we had also an animation where we were moving some objects around the view, and then you want it to bounce on the corner. Then you just say with bouncing. So you wrap your animation into another animation, which will deal with the logic, some extra logic. And I find the concept powerful, but I think difficult for the beginners.
Incredibly. I mean, if I think about it, I also don't understand why, if I wrap it with timing and I just assign it to the value once, why it then is able to keep changing over time. But the fact that it is so composable, and actually this is not an area where there are a lot of bugs, it works pretty well. I'm pretty happy to accept this magic and just benefit from it.
Now that Reanimated 2 has been out since a couple of months, to me it's becoming clearer and clearer that Reanimated 2 is React for the UI thread. Because it's really the concepts of reaction, of functional, pure functions, and dealing with side effects. It feels actually and looking at dependencies when things have changed and executing side effects, it really feels very similar actually from React. But basically, we run all these things in the UI thread. But in terms of side effects and having pure functions, it feels conceptually very close to React.
It definitely does in terms of composability. But I feel at the same time like the code that you run on the UI thread, it's not declarative anymore like it was in the Reanimated one, but it's imperative.
Isn't that funny? So Reanimated 1 was declarative, but the side effects were done imperatively. So you were declaring your animation, but your animation was a block of code, and each line could be a side effect. You were assigning variables and so on. Reanimated 2, we write the code imperatively, we write JavaScript, but the side effects are done completely declaratively, like a la React. So interesting.
And I think that's good actually. Not everything needs to be declarative. For updating your UI, sure, but animations, that's actually easier in an imperative way.